everybody, and welcome back to the Fairview Church podcast. My name is Jon, and today I'm with Pastor Tyler, and we are going to be talking about what is the end goal for the local church. Tyler, you want to tee us off on that topic?
Yeah, man, that's a big topic, isn't it?
Huge.
What is the end goal? Okay. Man, that takes us a little bit everywhere, doesn't it? I don't even know how to begin well, but I think let's just clarify the question. We're saying a local church exists, and what is the goal, the end goal? Not even that when you achieve it, you're done, but what are you after?
Right. What is the purpose, primary purpose for that church?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what we see potentially are people who have really good things about the church that sometimes they make that primary when in fact they are a part of that healthy kind of lifestyle or healthy church setting, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But it may not be the primary goal. So let's kind of talk through this a little bit as far as our church, Fairview Church. How would we start to define?
Okay, can we give them a teaser?
Yes.
Can we tell them where we're going and then tell them how we get there?
Sure.
Is that good?
Yeah.
The end goal. Wait a minute, I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
And then I'm going to answer.
Okay.
You'd think we'd talk about this episode before we ask the question. Pastor Jon, what is the end goal of the local church?
The end goal of the local church is to glorify God through multiplying the gospel, kingdom-focused churches throughout the world. And so it is to create and develop disciples who will then go and create and develop disciples. And we see that in the scriptures happening in the local church, not separated from it. And so it's kind of like a multifaceted type of approach to discipleship.
Okay, my answer is the exact same. It's just much shorter. Church planting.
There we go.
But everything you just said is spot on. You have to get there somehow.
Sure.
Okay, but let's also state this before we even talk about Fairview specifically, even though this is Fairview specifically. The only way a local church can see itself and its mission and purpose correctly is with the more broad picture of the kingdom of God.
Absolutely.
And when we're talking about the kingdom of God, we're recognizing that when Jesus came, his incarnation, he was on earth, his ministry, his message was centered on the kingdom. Mm-hmm. Not the church primarily. And then here comes the resurrection, the ascension, and the church is birthed. And then the second coming of Christ is the final culmination, all things kingdom fulfillment. Okay, so now we're in the church age, we're this in between, and it's important to note all that detail because a local church, correct me if you want to say it differently, but no local church should ever just be about itself. Mm-hmm. Like it must have a kingdom mindset, which is why we're saying the end goal is church planting.
Absolutely. And I think, too, you start to see, even in the book of Acts, immediately that we actually see some obstacles to that, to when Jesus says, go, I'm sending you out to all these different places. And then what do? They just stay, you know? And it's like, no, the point of that message to go, the point of the salvation that we've been given is to be kingdom-minded and is to bring that to places and to create spaces where people can come to know the living God and have a life that is glorifying him.
So if we're looking for a good example then of a local church that seems to do this well, biblically speaking, I know for me, it's the church in Antioch that we see in Acts. Mm-hmm. And gosh, I was saying this right before the episode, I wish we had more information about Antioch because the glimpse we get, and I understand that Luke's purpose is not to necessarily flesh out the local church of Antioch, but the local church in Antioch seems to, one, be a church plant to begin with. Of course, every church was at that point in time, but they're a church plant, and then we see them going through some very purposeful elements that allow them to send in order to plant other churches. Okay, so how do we take the example of Antioch and filter it through to Fairview Church? Is that a right question to ask?
Yeah, I think so. I think, we've kind of danced around a little bit. I think Antioch had a DNA established already. I mean, if you look at their culture, their time, you look at the spread of the gospel in those early centuries, and they automatically had this DNA of going and creating and going into communities and preaching the gospel and then establishing these places of worship. I think what you find, like in Acts chapter 2, for example, we see the Holy Spirit descends on the people, and then at the very end of Acts chapter 2, it's awesome. It actually talks about how the church grows there, and it talks about what they were doing. They were receiving the word. They were being baptized. Thousands of people are coming to know Christ. They're fellowshipping together, breaking bread. They're praying for one another, giving up things for the health of one another. And then what I think is the coolest one is at the very end, it says they had favor amongst all people. So even non-Christians are looking at these people and are saying, how amazing is that? But then what does God tell us to go do? He tells us to go and bring that elsewhere. And that's when we just talked about the people didn't do that. They stayed. And what was actually really interesting in Acts is persecution that actually causes the expansion of the gospel out and continues to expand for the centuries, because you have these people doing exactly like what they're doing in Acts chapter 2, being faithful followers of Christ, loving their community, sharing the gospel, breaking bread together, doing all the different things that it tells us. And then they are bringing that to a new place. They're training up like Paul and Barnabas, for example. And if you need any type of vision or study that you want to do on your own to look at church planting, look at Paul's missionary journeys. That's pretty much all what he did. It was him going, planting a church, and then he would go and plant another church, and then he'd plant another church, and then on another missionary journey, he would come back and he would check on that church, and he would, raise up leaders to take it over, and they would do all these different things throughout that area where they are expanding the gospel, and that is what Paul's missionary journeys were. It was a church planting, just a campaign, That
was it.
And it was beautiful. And that's how we see the model and expansion of the church expand, through the early church. And they were a little bit more structured than a lot of churches are today as far as, the different diagrams of polity and those sorts of things back then. But it was clear that their model of expanding this kingdom mindset was that my church is not for myself. My church is for down the street. My church is for the city next door. My church is for the world. And that was the mindset they believed in.
Okay, so to get to that end goal, for a local church to be about church planting, there's also the need for that local church to, one, not only exist, but to also be healthy. Because as you mentioned earlier, the DNA was already set. Every local church today has to consider their DNA, because when we talk about church planting, multiplying, replicating, you want to send and plant or revitalize. We'll talk about that hopefully in a little bit. But you're going to want to send and support and be the same DNA somewhere else, contextualized, of course, as you are at your home base. Okay, so let's just talk about those things, and let's also say some of these details about what a local church is and does is also very good and healthy. All right, so if we look at Fairview Church, and again, I think a lot of this, I don't want to piggyback off Antioch the entire time, but John, when you do your PhD work sometime soon, if you don't mind just go ahead and doing a thorough study of the church at Antioch, that would save me a lot of time and energy. So if you'll take care of that, that'd be great. So we know that a local church, and what we say at Fairview Church is we have three basic components to our existence and that shapes much of our DNA, that we gather to worship, we equip the saints, and then we reach our neighbors. Okay, so we gather to worship. There's elements of that. That's good, healthy, and right. We need that. And this is what begins now starting much of the discipleship process. This begins to incorporate and really create our DNA and our culture of things. Because that Sunday morning worship gathering is, a lot of times, one of the most visible things that outsiders of the church will look at upon the church. They may not always see our smaller groups or our classes or different things going on, but they'll see that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to gathering to worship, there's a lot of beautiful things that Fairview does. I think that amplifies that. I mean, that's where you find community, and I think even you talk about just Sunday morning in general, even some of the groups that are found there. I think there's this element of gathering that focuses on that oneness with one another.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a statement that is actually a healthy thing. I think if you were to do a study in the one another's that you find in Scripture, they are evident. And being the body of Christ, right? Being members of one body, that they were this temple that's being built, we're all part of this, Christ being our chief, cornerstone. And so for me, when I look at all of that and like gathering to worship, I'm looking at how wonderful Fairview currently has a spirit of gathering.
Yeah.
They're friendly. They bring other people in. They're reaching out to their neighbors who are far from the Lord in some sense and trying to bring them into a community. So there are aspects of this gathering that they are reaching out and trying to live that specifically out.
Yeah, yeah. And this is good. Again, everything you just mentioned has got to be cultivated in community, relationships, now accountability, the hospitableness of, you're talking about, of reaching the neighbors, and just the gathering to worship. That's got to be built, and that's got to be sustained so that when planting comes, we know what we're sending.
And I think, too, and maybe you can speak into this more, I think that also comes down to, while services might look a little bit different between church plants and their sister plants or whatever it might be, there's an element of that there's some kind of like fundamental, parts of that worship, though, that are the same, right? That we have said these are convictional areas or these areas that we just supremely believe are helpful for disciples to be made. So what might be some examples of that real quick of those things that are important? Yeah,
I think, you can narrow it down with the ordinances are going to be an always situation. No matter what that sister church is, the ordinances are going to be present. That preaching of the word, and at least for me personally, I would be very convictional that that church that's planting is an expository type preaching church. I think musical worship that we're talking about, the style of that may look a little different, but in a lot of ways, song selections and the filter of what is sung for the corporate body, I think that's going to be very similar. But how many other things can be different? Well, your venue could be different. The meeting location in that venue looks different, feels different. There's so many different options. Sure. Childcare, whether you have it, whether you don't have it. I mean, now you're factoring lots of things, but fundamentally, the convictions, the principles, if you will, of what the gathering is to be will still be there. Yeah. So I think that's part of the beauty of a local church, not just existing, but then replicating itself somewhere else, that you've got core principles at play that may look extremely different, but they're being shared philosophically.
Sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
I think, too, like when we think about like the worship gathering, and like specifically with like church planting as like kind of a backdrop, the danger is the good thing is to have these core principles, these core convictions. The danger is to say, well, I'm going to do exactly what is going to be done here, because you might go in a context where that just doesn't work. And so you have to have flexibility on those areas to kind of adjust and make decisions. Yeah. And that would even work. You introduced this term revitalization as well. For those listening, that is just somebody going to a church that's not doing well, particularly. Generally, these are congregations of a church that have waned in membership over the years, and what they try to do is revitalize the church, and so they bring in a pastor or a staff, or a church adopts that church and says, we're going to help, and we're going to help you grow, and we're going to help do all these different things so that one day that church can either flourish either as what it used to be or in a new kind of church planting effort. And so that's kind of what those terms mean. But
yep. And like you said, that could look different. Yeah. I mean, you take Fairview Church right now, we are blessed with an incredible giftingness of musicians, instrumentalists, singers, and that's awesome. We're used to that when we gather here on Sundays at Fairview Church. That is not always the case with a church plant. You may start out with 40 people, That's a generous number for some church plants.
That would actually be very generous for most church plants.
But if you start with 40 people, you may have one person.
Yeah, one person who knows how to play guitar.
Yes, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. What else for Fairview Church? We talked about gather to worship. What else? We said equip the saints.
Equip the saints. Yeah, I think something in that realm. We talk about our group settings for discipleship. Mm-hmm. We talk about our formation classes that we're doing.
Right.
Even like the conferences that sometimes we do here and there to help equip and to encourage the saints to grow up. I think personal evangelism, you taught a class on that last year, to help equip our people on being evangelistic and sharing the gospel. And so we see that this is a major point of the church is actually raising up people. Like no Christian should ever get comfortable where they're at spiritually.
Right.
We should always be wanting to grow. We should always be wanting to learn something new. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be everyone is a theologian, but not everyone needs to be a academic, PhD theologian, but everyone is a theologian, right? But we all need to be growing. We all need to be focusing on that. And what I love about many of our folks here at Fairview is they have that desire. They have that deepness to want to grow deeper. I think one of the beautiful aspects of a lot of our smaller groups that we have here, whether that's in the community group setting or the D group setting, is that you have these groups who are wanting to dive deeper. And that's a beautiful reality of a byproduct of equipping the saints, of wanting to be equipped, wanting to grow. And then I think this semester, as we start our formation classes, I've been really pleased with the amount of folks that have dove into those classes and
the excitement.
The excitement and just the fervor of wanting to learn, I think has been really cool.
Yeah, and I think what's important to note here when we're talking about equipping the saints, and again, we're talking about we've got to be a healthy local church first before we can reach our end goal, is we're looking very specifically to raise up leaders, ministry leaders, teachers, new servants, across the board. We're looking to purposefully equip everybody here at Fairview Church. Because I think this is important, and you can speak to this as far as your even background experience of having been in church plant scenarios yourself and even seeing teams being sent, that not everyone will be sent. Not everyone will experience going to a church plant or a church revitalization. That may not be everyone's experience in their Christianity. That's okay. But I hold this philosophy. A local church must be willing at times to even send their best. Now, that's hard when you really think about it, but here's how I believe it's beautiful. If you're willing to send your best and they go to help plant or revitalize, then we've already been equipping the next person to take their role that they're leaving a vacancy behind. And it's that in sports, it's that next man up mentality. Like, here you go. Now, you're ready for this because you've been getting poured into and you've been equipping others already.
Yeah, it's just that old adage of not everyone's going to go, but everyone needs to have that mission and that mindset. Because even you being in the classroom along somebody who's getting equipped, you can build that relationship of encouragement so that when they do go, you have that relationship to speak into and to pray for. I've seen churches honestly have a very sacrificial nature when it comes to their best and really send out their best. You're talking 150 people, core leaders in their ministries. Yeah. And what's been astounding, if you talk to these churches, what they'll say is, and we never skipped a beat. With people who originally were just sitting in the back, were inspired to then fulfill a new role within that church.
Yes.
And they saw this beautiful kind of development of not only leadership, but then they were able to send out several teams in several years.
Yes.
And if you think about it, this church, they're larger than what we are, but you talk about a church that had maybe 2,000 people or so, send out 150 to 200 people every other year. That is a lot of people, even for 2,000, like a church of 2,000. That's like 10% every 2 years.
Yes.
Sending out people to go and to plant or revitalize. That is just incredible. There's a church in right outside Southeastern. They do a really good job of revitalization and sending teams and raising up. And and it is just a beautiful thing when you get to see people being sacrificial. And the Lord always will, I really believe, He will put it on the hearts of the people that are meant to go, and He will not necessarily do that for those that don't want to go, right? As far as, confirmation or not confirmation, or whether it's something that they need to go or need to stay on. But what's been really interesting to me in my experience of church planting is the people you would expect to go with you never do. And it's always
the least
likely that are like, let's go.
You're like, where did that fire come from?
Exactly.
Well, and I had one pastor say, I told him, I said, I'm going to steal this when the day comes. But he said, anyone on the church membership rolls, anyone can go except for my wife. He said, that's the only person, because he was training up that staff member, that church planter, and he said, you can go ask anyone in this church except for my wife.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And there's multiple ways, by the way, to do equipping the saints. Like, for example, I know church planners, when they do this, it's, we're going to send 150 people. Well, 50 of them might say, you know what, I'm going to give 1 year of my time or 2 weeks. So sometimes it's not even a permanent thing. We have, on some level, we've seen it in our own church where we have individual peoples who have gone out to go do this for a season because they believe in this kingdom mindset of equipping the saints, and God has called them to use their gifts in a particular setting, and before they come back, right?
And it's good and okay to say, I'm committing 2 years. Yeah. And then I'm right back to Fairview for whatever reasons, whatever season.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's multiple ways to do that.
But then also consider if the culture, if the DNA of a local church is that the end goal is church planting, then when it comes to our equipping the saints, you and I, everybody has a mentality of, I not only need to be equipped myself, but I need to equip other people because I don't know what may be in their future.
Yeah, and you may not even know what's in, if you're listening, your future. Like, you may be dead set right now, I would never go and do a church plant. And yet, that's what I said when we were walking through D.C. I will never come here and plant a church. Yes. And you know what the Lord did? He knocked on my door and he said, guess where you're going to go? So you never know where God will lead you or bring you to. And what you have to do is just be faithful to walk in the steps of obedience that the Holy Spirit puts in your life.
Yes.
But you cannot idly just think, you know what, I'm okay, I'm good. The Lord can convict a lot. And at some point you feel the sting of disobedience and you will go. Once you start to feel that sting of disobedience, when you feel like God has clearly called you.
And we're not discussing a lot of things. There's assessments.
Oh, of course.
There's lots of prep. There's a lot of conversations that still happen between now and then. That's not. Those are details. We're talking about. Let's make sure we're all on the same page here. Let's make sure we know where we're headed with this thing. So let me just go ahead and say that third component. Let's move here because I know you have some stats, and I'm really interested to hear in some of these stats. But our third component at Fairview Church, we say we're out to reach our neighbors. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, back to Antioch. We see them purposefully gathering to worship. We see them purposefully equipping the saints, and then purposefully, and they say, hey, we were gathered. The Spirit moved, and they sent.
Yeah.
They sent. Now, this is a part of reaching our neighbors that has both, we say that both with an element of here at Fairview Church, we want to be missionally driven just in our everyday lives. But there's also reaching our neighbors with church planting. Will you share with us some of those statistics that you have regarding, and this is Lebanon specific statistics?
I have U.S. versus just church planting in general.
Okay.
But I do have some Lebanon specifics as well. So one thing to know is that sometimes when we talk about church planting, people ask the question of, do we really need more churches? Especially in Lebanon, right? Fairview sits on Church Row. Do we really need more churches in Lebanon?
Isn't that a yes or no answer? It's like, okay, so the reality is we're over-churched, but under-reached. There are so many churches, but isn't there a caveat though? Yes, we need more churches, but we need healthy churches.
Yes, we do need healthy churches. And when you start to look at the statistics of Lebanon in particular, let's start there.
Okay.
Everyone's Wilson came out with this statistic a couple years ago, so I don't know how accurate it is today, but this was accurate maybe like 2 years ago.
Okay.
That about 70% of Wilson County is unchurched. So just think about that.
All right, hold that thought again.
So 70% of Wilson County
70%
is not
are
involved
claiming they're not connected
to a church.
And this is a couple years old now, so we've had growth. I'm only assuming that it's probably a higher percentage.
Yeah, and so again, if my recollection is good, what we see is that this mantra in our mind, or this vision that we have of Lebanon and Wilson County being Bible Belt is actually not true. And even if you look at, like, NAM came out with statistics, or somebody, NAM or Barna, they looked at what the most Bible saturated cities are per capita, when it comes to Christians. And Nashville hit like number 1 or number 2. It was like on the top 5 list. This was a couple years ago. And even that was like 49%. So even when we start to think about like all these things, so let's just be very conservative here. Somewhere between 50 and 70% of our neighbors are not engaged in church, and we're okay with that. Right? like that is not a good statistic. The reality is that not only is Lebanon one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S., but Wilson County is getting large as well.
Yes.
We have people moving in here. So we have like different nations moving into this area, which is a blessing in and of itself. We are growing at tremendous rates, and I don't know if the church planting efforts that we have around here can actually keep up with the growth that we're actually seeing. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, we need healthy churches, but we need churches. Like, the answer to that, when someone says, do we need more? Yes, absolutely. Let me give you a statistic from the U.S. in general. Because of the U.S.'s growth that we see currently, if we planted 270,000 churches, we still couldn't keep up with the growth of the United States of America.
In a year, 270,000 churches in 1 year.
I think that's in total to catch up right now.
Yeah, like just to stay current with the population.
Just to stay current for the norm of what we used to have when it came to churches engaging their community at a healthy rate. Because the reality is, there are churches that are 6,000, 7,000, 10,000. Like, you have those that's less than 1%, if that.
That's not the norm.
That's not the norm. And even then, they're going to experience their own type of problems when it comes to discipleship, having that many people.
Sure.
Not that it couldn't be done, but they're going to have their own struggles. I'm talking about just the normal, like, church and community, and being able to reach within their actual means to reach the people in a healthy manner. We would need 270,000 churches.
That's not even to mention how many churches are closing their doors.
No, so that every year we have 3,700 churches that close, and only 4,000 churches that are planted. So put that in.
All right, hold on. 3,700 close their doors.
4,000 are planted. So we are only netting 300 churches about a year. So just put that in. Like we have older churches, unfortunately, that are not being revitalized, that churches are not taking ownership of in the community, that need to revitalize those churches, because what they're doing is that they're closing their doors.
We have some here in Lebanon.
Yeah, they're closing their doors.
Yes.
Now, what's beautiful is sometimes those churches will see a church plant and say, hey, take our property, and they'll be gracious in those things. But the reality is we're not growing by the rates that we need to really keep up with the growth that we see, and to really even make an impact in a lot of regards in some areas. But what's more astounding to me, it's a blessing, is that NAM has planted, so North American Ministry Board is like the Southern Baptist church planting entity. they've planted 11,000 churches since 2010.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage you to go on their website, nam.net. They have a slider on their website that shows you what it looked like, the map of the U.S. in 2010, and to what it is in 2025, and you will be blown away by the difference between the expansion of those churches.
Just where church plants have happened.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it's beautiful. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of effort happening on the part of SBC to plant these churches.
Yeah.
But even with NAM, which I think is a really great church planting organization, they've really had made their mark over the past 15 years when it comes to the church planting realm.
Right.
Even then, it's almost an impossible task if not every church is on board to have this mission.
Well, and to be very fair to NAM, and speaking to our folks, NAM is not planting churches. I mean, they're helping.
Sure.
They're doing that.
Yeah.
But I believe they take this stance. I know that many of the guys that I've talked to have, but local churches plant local churches.
Correct, yeah. So
NAM comes along and
yes.
helps in so many ways, financially, assessment, but it is, and that's the theological conviction, local churches plant other local churches.
Plant local churches.
Yeah.
So when I planted in 2015, when we were in D.C., we not only had a sending church,
right.
but then we had numerous partner churches.
Right.
So we had like 21 partner churches that partner with us to do
So
that.
we're talking about, we're not looking at NAM saying, all right, go do your work.
Right.
No, this is we take ownership. So again, back to our original question of this episode, what's the end goal of the local church? Well, that's us. What's our end goal? Planting.
Yeah, and with that too, just to throw that out there, with the SBC in general, like that's their heartbeat as well. Yeah. So we have NAM, but even international church planting with the IMB, they're also trying to raise up indigenous church planters on the field.
Yes.
So this is not something that's just unique to North America. This is widespread as far as the mission of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got more statistics regarding established churches
versus church plants.
Okay.
And effectiveness when it comes to evangelism, when it comes to reaching the lost and the unchurched.
Okay.
And you're going to want to hold on to your seat for this
Okay,
one.
so let's clarify. An established church, Fairview Church is an established church.
Correct.
We're talking church plant maybe 5 years and younger.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All
around
right.
5 years. Normally a church plant is also defined by established budget. So you talk about
self-sustaining or not.
Yes, those types of things.
Okay.
But normally it's about 5 years. Is probably the general 5 years and younger.
Sure.
That's what we're talking about. So first one is this. In established churches today, 60 to 80% of their growth comes from transfer growth. That means from one church to another church. The church
60 to 80% in established churches. That's okay.
Is transfer growth. But 60 to 80% of a church plant's growth is going to be from de-churched or unchurched people. So you're talking about people who have either rejected or had a bad experience in the church or just not interested in the church, or unchurched. They've never been to church before. Their growth is going to be about 60 to 80% of the growth coming in is going to be people that fit that bill.
Yeah. Well, I think we see that. I think we feel that if we're honest, because if we look at our Discover Fairview classes, most of the people who are coming into Fairview Church are already Christians. Mm-hmm. They're coming from other churches. Now, their scenarios are way different, and that's cool, but it's rare for us to have a new convert that has now joining but you're saying for the church plant, it's the exact opposite. They're seeing de-churched, non-church, new converts making more of their congregation.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but the reason why I think church plants are more successful in that is because, one, they're smaller, so they allow them to be more intentional. Two, when you have a church plant and you have church plant members, it really is such a strong community feel that like you're on mission together, that you feel the mission. Like every day you're going out into your context and you're really asking the question, is that person a Christian? And I need to get them into our church plant.
You need to be where I am.
Yeah, like it is, you are bought into what God is doing within your plant. And when everybody has that type of fervor and zeal, it is attracted to those who who might be interested when you're out in the community and sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
But with that, we also see then effects of that play out within the rest of the church. So, for example, established churches, for every 100 members, may reach about 3 to 5 people. Within their membership, as them going out and bringing people in. Whereas in church plants, that number raises to 10 people per 100 members. So almost double the amount of evangelism or relational equity is being built out there to bring people into a fellowship than there is in established churches.
Wow.
And then last but not least, you have your baptism kind of statistic. So in established churches, for every 100 people, you'll probably see around 3 to 4 baptisms for every 100 people.
Okay.
In a church plant, and this is the most shocking, that jumps all the way up to 16 baptisms per 100. You're almost talking 3.5 to 4 times the amount of baptisms and salvations happening within church plants as opposed to established settings.
So I've been mulling something for the last few years, just studying Scripture, theological conviction, thinking about the question of the end goal of the local church. I really think I'm coming to the understanding and the belief of me personally that the best or the most biblical mission model for a local church is found in church planting. It just seems like everything points to that direction.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the scriptures, what you see is you see churches that are not just sending disciples to go out.
Yeah.
And I really believe that the expansion of like the gospel in our day and age right now that we're seeing, and the kingdom expansion that we see across the U.S., like the amount of church plants that are happening now is astronomical compared to other times and times in life in Christian history, maybe outside of like the early church. But the reason right now we're seeing this massive explosion is because churches have stopped operating under the assumption that I'm just making disciples. We're making disciples so that they can go and make other disciples and start this mission work. And I really do believe, as you mentioned, I think church planting is the vehicle in which we do that.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't negate any of the other beautiful things about church. I hear phrases like, we're a hospital for the sick. Absolutely we are.
Yeah.
But who else needs that hospital? Hartsville and Gallatin. Yeah. We can name all these different cities around here where we could raise up and build these beautiful Christ-centered, gospel-centered churches, kingdom-minded churches, and then go and train and then send them so that they can bring a little bit of Fairview over there. Now, it's not going to be quite like Fairview because they are their own identity, their own autonomous church, right? But it allows them to build and to grow and have that mindset of a missional mindset, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so we started with one question.
Yeah.
What is the end goal of the local church?
Church planting.
And or revitalization, which is some of the similar type thoughts there.
But I think, for me, though, I would maybe phrase that a little bit just for the person who's hearing.
Yeah.
The goal of the local church, yes, is to plant churches, but a part of that, as we've talked about, is to disciple their people well so that they might one day be able to go and be a church planter or church plant member. Yeah. And I think that's the spirit there. Even if they may never go, that's the spirit that we should foster.
That's awesome. Well, hey guys, thank you for listening. I've enjoyed this conversation. I don't know how long we talk, but we could talk longer. This is a passion I know for you. I enjoy this as well. But we thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, Ask the Pastor episodes coming up. So make sure and send Pastor John whatever questions you have. And we thank you for listening. Until next time.